My beloved child, there is a silence surrounding you right now that feels ordinary on the surface, but beneath it, something deeper is moving, something unseen, something unspoken, and yet, intensely real. You may think nothing is happening, you may believe the distance has become normal, but what you cannot see is the storm quietly building inside the one who has gone quiet. Don't skip, because what is unfolding is more significant than it first appears. And here is where it becomes unexpected. Their silence is not peace, it is pressure. It is the kind of pressure that forms when words are held back for too long, when emotions circle the mind without an exit, when thoughts repeat themselves late at night with no one to hear them. You see, they are not calm the way it looks, they are overwhelmed in a way they cannot explain, even to themselves. Something important is waiting for you, and it begins with understanding this one truth: silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes, it means too much is trying to be said at once. Now pause for a second, because this part matters more than you realize. Have you ever felt something so strongly, yet had no idea how to express it without changing everything? That is exactly where they are right now. Their heart is full, but their voice feels blocked. Their mind is loud, but their actions remain still. And this contradiction, this inner conflict, is slowly pulling them into a space they never expected to be in. Not because they want distance, but because they don't know how to cross it anymore. Something subtle is shifting, and you might have sensed it already without fully understanding why. The energy between you has not disappeared, it has only become quieter, deeper, more intense in a way that doesn't show on the surface. And this is where most people misunderstand what is happening. They assume silence means disinterest, but in your case, silence has become the place where everything is building. Don't skip, because this next realization may change how you see everything. They are thinking about you more than they admit, more than they show, more than they are comfortable with. Not in a dramatic way, but in quiet, repeated moments, in the pauses between their daily routine, in the small triggers that remind them of what was left unsaid. And every time that thought returns, it adds another layer of pressure inside them. And here is the part that feels almost hidden: they want to speak, but they fear what speaking will unlock. Because once they start, they won't be able to go back to pretending everything is fine. Once they say what has been sitting in their heart, everything changes. And change, even when it is needed, can feel overwhelming when you don't know how the other person will respond. So they wait, not because they don't care, but because they care in a way that feels too big to risk at the wrong moment. And in that waiting, their thoughts grow louder, their emotions grow heavier, and their silence becomes something they can no longer fully control. Stay till the end, because what is forming here is not random. There is a reason this tension is building instead of fading. There is a reason their silence feels different from before. It is not empty anymore, it is charged, filled with something that is trying to find its way out. And here is a question that may stay with you longer than you expect. What happens when someone can no longer hold back what they have been feeling? Not slowly, not carefully, but all at once, in a moment they didn't even plan? Because that moment is closer than it seems. Something is moving beneath the surface, something that cannot stay hidden forever, and when it rises, it will not come quietly. But that is not the full story, not yet. Because what they are about to realize changes everything in a way neither of you saw coming, and it begins in a moment so small, you might almost miss it. It doesn't begin the way you expect, not with a message, not with a sudden confession, not even with a clear decision. It begins in a quiet, almost invisible moment where something inside them finally refuses to stay silent anymore. You won't see it happen, but they will feel it, like a shift they cannot ignore, like a thought that suddenly becomes louder than all the others they tried to push away. And in that exact moment, everything changes inside them before anything changes outside. Because they have been holding this in for longer than they admit, longer than even they fully understand. At first, it was manageable, just a passing thought, just a feeling they could distract themselves from. But slowly, without warning, that feeling began to grow roots. It started appearing more often, staying longer, becoming harder to ignore. And now, it's no longer something they can silence. Don't skip, because this is where the truth begins to unfold in a way that feels deeply personal. They are not just thinking about reaching out, they are imagining it. They are replaying scenarios in their mind, how it would feel to hear your voice again, how it would feel to break this silence that has become heavier with every passing day. But along with that desire, comes hesitation, comes doubt, comes the fear of what might happen next. You see, the silence between you has created two worlds. One is real, where nothing is being said, where everything appears still. And the other exists inside them, where conversations are happening constantly, where emotions are flowing freely, where everything they wish they could say is already being spoken, just not out loud. And living between these two worlds is exhausting them. Something important is waiting for you, because this internal conflict is not something that can last forever. No one can carry unspoken emotions indefinitely without something eventually breaking through. But here is where it becomes even more intense. They are starting to realize that the silence is not protecting them anymore, it is hurting them. At first, they believed staying quiet would keep things simple, would prevent complications, would allow time to pass until everything felt less intense. But time didn't soften anything, it only made everything more complicated. Because now, the emotions they tried to avoid have become stronger, more layered, more difficult to untangle. And this realization is unsettling them. Because now they are facing something they didn't expect, the understanding that avoiding communication didn't solve anything, it only delayed what was always meant to happen. Pause here for a moment, and feel this shift. There is a difference between choosing silence, and being trapped in it. And they are beginning to feel the difference very clearly. Their mind is no longer at ease, their heart is no longer calm, and the space they created between you is no longer comfortable. It is restless, and that restlessness is pushing them toward something they can no longer avoid. Stay till the end, because what is building here is leading to a moment that cannot be stopped once it begins. They are starting to question everything, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, persistent way that follows them throughout the day. Small thoughts, small realizations, small moments that keep bringing them back to the same place. Why does this still matter so much? Why does your presence still feel so close, even in silence? Why does the idea of reaching out feel both terrifying and necessary at the same time? These questions are not leaving them anymore, and the more they try to ignore them, the louder they become. There is something almost magnetic about this phase, something pulling them in a direction they didn't plan to go. And the more they resist, the stronger that pull becomes. Because deep down, they know something is unfinished. Not broken, not lost, just incomplete. And that sense of incompleteness is what's driving them closer to a decision they can no longer delay. But here's the part that most people never see. They are not only afraid of what will happen if they reach out. They are equally afraid of what will happen if they don't. Because now they are beginning to see a future where this silence continues, where nothing is said, where everything remains unresolved. And that future feels heavier than the fear of speaking. So they are caught in between two powerful forces, fear and longing. And when those two forces collide, something always shifts. Don't skip, because this next layer goes even deeper. There are moments, very brief but very real, where they almost act on it, where they come close to breaking the silence, where their hand pauses, where their thoughts align just enough for them to consider reaching out. But then, something holds them back. Not because they don't want to, but because they want it to be right. They don't want a rushed conversation. They don't want a surface-level exchange. They don't want something that fades as quickly as it begins. They want meaning. They want clarity. They want to say something that actually reflects everything they've been holding inside. And that's why they hesitate, not out of indifference, but out of depth. Because when someone feels this much, they don't want to express it halfway. They want the moment to match the emotion. And until they feel ready for that, they remain silent, even as everything inside them continues to build. Something important is waiting for you, because this kind of emotional buildup does not disappear. It transforms. It grows. It reaches a point where it can no longer stay contained. And when that point arrives, everything changes very quickly. But before that moment comes, there is one final phase they are moving through. One final realization that will shift everything inside them. And it begins with something simple, yet powerful. They are starting to miss not just you, but how they felt when they were connected to you. Not just your presence, but the energy, the understanding, the familiarity that cannot be easily replaced. And this realization is what makes everything more intense. Because now it's not just about reaching out. It's about reconnecting with something that felt real. And once someone begins to recognize the value of what they had, the silence becomes even harder to maintain. Stay till the end, because what comes next is where everything starts to move. They are approaching a moment where the balance shifts, where the fear of speaking becomes smaller than the need to be heard, where the hesitation becomes weaker than the desire to express. And when that shift fully happens, there is no going back to silence. Because once a person reaches that point, they don't just think about speaking anymore. They act. But the way they act, the timing of it, and what they choose to say, that is where everything becomes unpredictable. Because this is not just a conversation waiting to happen. This is something deeper, something that has been forming in silence, preparing itself to finally be revealed. And when it does, it won't feel small. It won't feel casual. It will feel like something that was always meant to be said. Finally finding its voice. But that moment is still just ahead. And what leads into it is something even more unexpected than you think. Something shifts in a way that cannot be reversed, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet, undeniable realization that settles deep inside them. It is the kind of moment that doesn't ask for attention, yet changes everything. And once it arrives, they can no longer pretend that silence is enough. Because now, they are not just feeling the weight of what was left unsaid, they are beginning to understand the cost of keeping it that way. Don't skip, because this is where the story takes a turn you didn't expect. They begin to notice something unusual, something subtle at first, but impossible to ignore once it repeats itself. In the middle of their routine, in the middle of conversations with others, in the middle of distractions they once relied on, your presence keeps returning. Not physically, but emotionally, like a quiet echo that refuses to fade. And it doesn't come with noise, it comes with clarity, a sudden awareness that what they tried to distance themselves from never actually left them. And that realization begins to unravel everything they thought they had under control. Because now, it's not just about missing you, it's about understanding you. It's about replaying moments, not with confusion anymore, but with a different perspective, a deeper awareness, as if something inside them has matured in the silence. They begin to see things they didn't see before, the meaning behind your words, the intention behind your silence, the way certain moments carried more depth than they realized at the time. And this new understanding changes the entire story in their mind. Stay till the end, because what they are realizing now is not something they can ignore. There is a quiet regret forming, not overwhelming, not heavy in a painful way, but present enough to make them pause. A realization that maybe, just maybe, they didn't fully recognize what they had while they had it. And this thought doesn't leave them easily. It follows them into quiet moments, into late nights, into the spaces where distractions no longer reach. And in those moments, something deeper begins to surface. They start asking themselves questions they avoided before. What if they misunderstood something? What if they walked away from something that still had meaning? What if silence was never the answer, but only a delay? These questions don't come all at once, they come slowly, gently, but persistently. And with every question, the wall they built between you begins to weaken. Because truth has a way of finding its way through, even when it's been buried under time and distance. Something important is waiting for you, because this is the stage where everything begins to align. They are no longer trying to distract themselves from you. They are no longer trying to push the thoughts away. Instead, they are starting to sit with them, to understand them, to feel them without resistance. And when a person reaches this point, something powerful begins to happen. Their fear starts to lose its control. Not completely, but enough for something new to take its place. Courage. Not loud courage, not sudden action, but a quiet readiness that builds over time. A readiness to face what they've been avoiding. A readiness to step out of silence, even if they don't know exactly how it will unfold. But here is where the story deepens even further. Because along with this readiness, comes a realization that changes everything. They begin to understand that communication is not just about speaking, it's about being seen, it's about being understood, it's about allowing another person to know what exists within you, without hiding, without filtering, without holding back. And they realize, they never fully allowed that before. Not completely, not in the way they are beginning to feel now. And this realization is what makes the silence unbearable. Because now, it's not just about what wasn't said, it's about what could have been felt, if they had allowed themselves to open up. Don't skip, because this next moment is where everything starts to accelerate. There comes a point, very close now, where thinking is no longer enough, where feeling is no longer enough, where the inner world they've been living in begins to demand expression. And when that point arrives, it doesn't ask for permission. It simply moves. They begin to feel an urge, not forced, not rushed, but undeniable. An urge to reach out, to break the silence, to say something, anything, that bridges the space between you. But this time, it's different from before. Because this time, it's not coming from confusion. It's coming from clarity. It's not coming from impulse. It's coming from understanding. And that difference changes everything. Because when someone speaks from clarity, their words carry weight. Their presence carries intention. Their actions carry meaning. Stay till the end, because what happens next is not random. They are preparing, even if they don't realize it fully. Preparing for a moment that will feel both unfamiliar and deeply natural at the same time. A moment where silence no longer feels safe. A moment where expression feels necessary. And in that moment, everything they've been holding back begins to find its way forward. But here is the part that makes this even more powerful. They are not just thinking about what to say. They are thinking about how it will feel for you. They are considering your perspective, your emotions, your response. And this awareness adds another layer of depth to what they are about to do. Because now, it's not just about releasing what they feel. It's about creating a moment that feels genuine, respectful, and real. And when someone reaches this level of awareness, their actions are no longer careless. They are intentional. Something important is waiting for you, because this is where everything begins to converge. All the silence, all the thoughts, all the emotions that have been building. They are no longer separate. They are coming together, forming something that cannot stay hidden anymore. And when that happens, the outcome is no longer uncertain. It becomes inevitable. Don't skip, because this is the turning point. There will be a moment, very soon, where they stop overthinking, where they stop waiting for the perfect time, where they stop searching for the perfect words, and instead, they choose honesty. Simple, clear, honest expression. And that moment will change everything. Because sometimes, it's not about saying everything perfectly. It's about saying something real, something true, something that finally breaks the silence that has been holding everything back. And when that silence breaks, it won't feel chaotic. It will feel right, like something that was meant to happen, finally happening. But even now, as close as they are to that moment, there is still one final layer unfolding within them. One final realization that will shape how everything is expressed. And it begins with something they are only just starting to understand. That connection, real connection, does not disappear just because it becomes quiet. It waits, it evolves, it deepens in ways that are not always visible, but always present. And once that truth fully settles within them, there will be nothing left to hold them back, because at that point, silence will no longer feel like an option. It will feel like something that was never meant to last this long. And what comes after that is not just communication. It is a release, a moment, a shift, something that carries everything they've been holding inside, into a space where it can finally be seen and felt by you. But that moment is just about to begin.